Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Good morning, and we really appreciate you spending your morning with us. My name is Dr. Martin Key. I'm Associate Professor of Digital Strategy and Marketing, as well as the Faculty Director of our Office of Executive Education here at UCCS College of Business. Before we get going, I just want to take a moment and talk about the partnership between UCCS and the Chamber and EDC. The goal of these business briefings is to bridge the gap between research and application. What we do is identify a faculty member at UCCS College of Business who's well-versed in the current research related to a business topic, and then match the faculty member with a chamber member who is actively engaged in the area of interest. So this overlap of research and application provides you with unique and comprehensive perspectives on the topic at hand, which today happens to be leadership principles. Before we get to our topic, I'd like to provide you with a brief overview of the offerings available through the UCCS College of Business Executive Education Program. We offer training programs for local business professionals. We can develop a customized training program for an organization on any given topic or problem you might be facing. We also offer open enrollment programs, which means that any business professional in the community can sign up for those. This fall, we're offering our mini MBA program. Basically, if you have a need for training within your organization, or if you're seeking avenues for professional development, the UCCS College of Business Executive Education Office can help. After today's session, if you feel that your organization could benefit from additional training, we would be delighted to develop a training program to meet your needs. I would now like to turn it over to my colleagues from the Chamber and EDC to introduce today's topic, as well as our presenters. And once again, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks, Martin. Good morning, everybody. I'm Reggie Ash. I'm the Chief Defense Development Officer at the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC. And Martin, I want to thank you, and I want to thank UCCS for the great, as you were talking about, it really is a great partnership that we have. And I personally get to work most with the military and veteran department that you've got there, which is one of the top 3 in the nation. And so we just partner with UCCS so often, and it's such a benefit to the whole community that we're able to do that. And so for everybody that's on today, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I especially want to welcome our guest speakers today, Miss Keeley Griego of Leadership Pikes Peak. Being a true native of Colorado Springs, Keeley knows a lot about our great city. She graduated magna cum laude from UCCS with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Women's and Ethnic Studies, a certificate in Gender and Sexuality Studies, a certificate in Global Studies, and a minor in Anthropology. She graduated from Leadership Pikes Peak Leadership Now program for young professionals in 2018, and she's currently the program manager for Leadership Now and LPP's Women's Community Leadership Initiative. Also, we have Dr. Don Warwick of UCCS. Dr. Warwick is an award-winning educator, consultant, and author who specializes in developing and coaching leaders, developing high-performance teams and organizations, and managing organizational development, change, and transformation. Dr. Warwick is a professor of management and organizational change at UCCS, where he holds the lifetime title of President's Teaching Scholar and has received the Chancellor's Award, the university's highest award, the Outstanding Teacher Award for the university, and has also received the Outstanding Faculty Award and many Outstanding Teacher Awards in the College of Business. Additionally, Dr. Warwick is on the faculty of the University of Colorado Executive MBA program. Dr. Warwick also leads a consultant and training company serving many Fortune 500 and international companies. And Dr. Warwick completed his BBA and MBA degrees at the University of Oklahoma and his doctorate at the University of Southern California. Now, I know a moment ago we were still waiting to see if Dr. Warwick was going to be able to join us, if he was still having some technical problems. I think he is still having technical problems. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Keeley Griego. Keeley, thanks so much. We look forward to hearing what you have to share with us today and for leading our discussion.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and especially thank you to UCCS and the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC for inviting me to speak this morning. My name is Keeley Griego, and as mentioned earlier, I am a program manager at Leadership Pikes Peak. If you would have told me even 3 years ago that I would be managing 2 community leadership programs, I would not have believed you. And that's because for most of my life, I had never really considered myself to be what I thought a leader was. Dr. Don, as mentioned earlier, he's having technical difficulties, but he had prepared 9 leadership myths that he was going to share with all of you. And I am just going to break these myths down a little bit. I'm definitely guilty of having believed all of these at one point, but I'm just going to share some real life examples from my experiences managing community leadership programs. So leadership myth number 1 is leaders are born and not made. I would like to take this opportunity to share with all of you my journey to a leadership position. So I was a women's and ethnic studies major in college, and that would oftentimes require dealing with really heavy topics such as systemic racism, intergenerational trauma, violence against women, and the list goes on and on and on. So as you can imagine, this could become emotionally draining at times, especially as I navigated my own trauma of being a sexual assault survivor. So I felt that I needed something that would remind me why the work that I was doing was important, because it was so easy to feel completely overwhelmed and even powerless when studying these systemic injustices that have been ingrained into society for hundreds of years. So in my junior year of college, one of my classmates shared with me the starfish story. If you haven't heard it, it goes like this. There was a young girl who was walking along a beach upon which thousands of starfish had been washed up during a terrible storm. And she would go to each starfish and pick it up and throw it back into the ocean. And other people just watched her with amusement as she did this until eventually there was a man who approached her and said, "Little girl, why are you doing this? Look at all of these starfish. You can't begin to make a difference. You can't save all these starfish." So at first she was discouraged by what he had said, but then she bent down and picked up another starfish and threw it into the ocean as far as she could. And she replied to him, "But I made a difference for that one." And so he looked at her and he was inspired about what she had done and said. And he joined her in throwing starfish back into the ocean. And soon other people joined in, and then all the starfish were saved. This story is what anchored me when I was feeling intimidated and overwhelmed and helpless. It highlighted what kind of an impact that I wanted to have. I wanted to help starfish, even one by one, because at one point I've been one of those starfish. During a time in my life when I felt fear and anxiety on a daily basis, and for years I struggled to love myself and trust that what I experienced was real. And I still, struggle to find my voice in speaking up about this difficult topic, about something that was difficult that I had to go through. And in all of that, it's the small acts of kindness that really have the biggest impact. And to make sure that I always remembered the sense of hope that the starfish story gave me, and always remembered what drove me to wanting to make a difference, even when I feel overwhelmed and even when I feel like maybe I can't make a difference. I actually got this starfish tattoo on my arm just to serve as a constant reminder and to be a symbol of hope. After graduating from college, I still didn't know exactly what direction I wanted to go in, but I knew what kind of an impact that I wanted to have. So when I found myself at orientation for Leadership Pikes Peak's Leadership Now program for young professionals, and they were sharing the starfish story, it felt like the stars had aligned. And in that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be, even though I didn't have all the other answers yet. And during the 5 months of programming in Leadership Now, it was really the first time that I had felt validated as somebody who's introverted, somebody who's not really confident in public speaking. And a lot of people, we have a set idea of what we think a leader looks like. And oftentimes people will write off the idea of being a leader or accepting a leadership position because they don't meet that socially constructed standard of leadership. Because of Leadership Now, I now have a new sense of validation, confidence, more knowledge, and even more passion for the only city I've ever called home. In 2 short years after I graduated from Leadership Now, I was hired to manage Leadership Now, in addition to Leadership Pikes Peak's Women's Community Leadership Initiative. So, as a leader at any level, you have to know what your authentic driving force is. You have to ask yourself, why do you do what you do? Why are you passionate about your work? My driving force stems from my own lived experiences as a sexual assault survivor, as a pansexual woman, as a Chicana, and I want to make a positive difference, even if it's just for one person, because we all seem to have these times in our lives when we feel so small. And I distinctly remember the times in my life that I have felt the smallest that I possibly could. And it's because of those moments that I want to help lift others up. And I want to let them know that I believe them when they share those experiences that are often difficult to open up about. Anyone can be that little girl who inspires a crowd of people to join in and save all the starfish. Anyone can be somebody who lifts others up and brings people together. And anyone can create a positive impact. So, this brings me to leadership myth number 2. You need to be in a formal leadership position to lead. So my job entails planning and organizing community leadership programs. So I wouldn't say that's like a formal leadership position, such as being like an elected official or even an executive director. But I still recognize that I have an impact on the people around me. And that's because we all have an impact on the people around us and on our communities. One of my favorite parts about my job is meeting amazing participants during the application process and during the interview process, and then bringing everybody together at orientation to meet each other. And throughout the program, it's so rewarding to see their relationships grow and knowing that they will collaborate and call on each other for years to come. And my role in all of that is so minimal because they are the people who are forming bonds and building trust. But I just feel rewarded because I organized everything and provided a shared experience for them. So just that small role, even though I'm not seeing the results of it right now, I'm not seeing them, collaborate 3 years from now. But I know that's going to happen, and that is still a really great impact. And I feel rewarded for having a role in that. Another example, just to show how one person can lead and inspire others. If you think about when somebody pays it forward at a coffee stand, it just takes one person to inspire the person behind them to pay it forward to the next person. And this goes on. So it might not be something like solving the pandemic or finding a solution to climate change, but it just goes to show how one person can have an effect on possibly dozens of other people who continue to go through that coffee stand. And one of those people, that small act of kindness might just be a great source of inspiration and hope. And it might be something that they needed because they're having a really tough day or a really tough year. We all remember 2020. And honestly, 2021 hasn't been super great either. It's just that small gesture of kindness from that very first person that inspired everybody else behind them to pay that small act of kindness forward to the next person. Having just referenced the pandemic, I know we're all sick of it, but it's a good example to show how quickly we've had to make adjustments within the last year. So now we have meetings on Zoom instead of in the office, and a lot of people work from home now. So many people have to juggle their jobs while trying to help their kids with e-learning. Leadership myth number 3 is the fundamentals of excellent leadership has significantly changed during these rapidly changing times. The ways in which we communicate and where and how we get things done has drastically changed, but the fundamentals of leadership, such as transparency and honesty and clear and open communication, are still as important as they were before. Can I get the next slide, please? So, if anything, we just appreciate more when leaders are honest and transparent and they have good character and good judgment, especially when they have the power to shape the day to day lives of so many other people. Next slide, please. Leadership myth number 4 is a leader's primary job is to get results. While results are, of course, great, a leader's primary job is to lead. Dr. Don, I just saw that he was able to join us. He's going to mention later that leadership is the process of providing vision, direction, and inspiration, and bringing out the best in people, teams, and organizations. So if a leader's primary goal is to get results, even without having a clear vision, even without facts or input from others, their results might not be effective, but they may even create detrimental consequences. Next slide, please. Leadership myth number 5, this one is my favorite. The best leaders are charismatic and commanding. When I was a participant in the Leadership Now program, the most valuable lessons that I learned were about myself. I learned that you don't necessarily have to be a charismatic, outgoing, extroverted public speaking expert to be a good leader. And learning this and knowing that I can still be myself and have a positive impact was incredibly empowering. We each have our own strengths and weaknesses, but being aware of them is what's key. So instead of feeling like I had to fundamentally change who I was as a person and be an expert at skills that were my weakest, I learned how to lean into my strengths and be honest with myself about my weaknesses. I know that one of my best strengths is being organized. So I lean into that because that is something that I know that I can offer that's beneficial. At the same time, I know that one of my weaknesses is public speaking, and I try to lean into that also. I'm leaning into it right now. And I do that because how am I supposed to get better if I don't practice? How am I supposed to become more confident and comfortable in situations that make me a little bit uncomfortable if I don't do it on a regular basis? So awareness and effort are key to honing in on good leadership skills. Next slide, please. Leadership myth number 6 is the best leaders are skilled at manipulating others to get them to do what they need them to do. Leadership is not about being in control. It's about teamwork and bringing people together instead of trying to wield power over them. I manage community leadership programs, but I have amazing steering committees who make programming the great experience that it is. And hypothetically, I could do it all on my own, but these volunteers bring to the table their own experiences and skills and opinions and networks that I couldn't possibly have all on my own. Their contributions genuinely make programming a much better experience as opposed to me trying to call all the shots and trying to do it all by myself. I, however, do not want to overlook the importance of setting expectations, of meeting deadlines, and establishing clear and honest means of communication. Being part of an effective team requires everybody to be on the same page, so setting group norms and expectations cannot be undervalued. Next slide, please. Leadership myth number 7 is skilled leaders are able to change their leadership style with different situations and different people. People just naturally interact differently with different people in different situations, and that is totally normal. But the fundamental leadership qualities of a good leader, such as honesty and humility, will be central to their character, and those things will not vary in different situations. So, for example, I find that I don't interact in the exact same way with the 2 different participants in the 2 different programs that I manage. I find that it's easier to be more vulnerable and to open up about being a sexual assault survivor with the women's program because so many of the participants in that program have similar stories and experiences. Similarly, I found it easier to be more upfront with this last Leadership Now program about my sexual orientation because there were more openly identified LGBTQ people in that program. And that doesn't mean that I'm a different person or that I do my job differently in the 2 different situations. Another example is like just the way that people talk with their best friends is probably going to be different than the way that they talk to their bosses, which is probably different than the way that they might talk to their families. That doesn't mean that their values change or that they change as a person, just different situations call for different demeanors sometimes. Leadership myth number 8, next slide please, is good leaders keep a psychological distance between themselves and those they lead so that they can be objective. Reflecting back on my first year in my current position, I did try to maintain what I thought was like a professional barrier. The leadership programs are about participants building trust amongst each other. And I tried to remove myself from that because it wasn't about me, it was about the participants' experience. But I realized that by doing so, I very easily could have come off as being a little standoffish. And that doesn't exactly encourage other people to open up with each other. Over the last year, I have learned that it's actually really important to be vulnerable as a leader. Being vulnerable, sometimes difficult and uncomfortable, can help you to be your authentic self. It connects you to what your driving force is, the reason you do what you do. Personal and professional boundaries are, of course, essential, but those boundaries don't have to require you to not share your own story and inspire other people to share theirs or to open up about something that you're really passionate about. So now, my favorite way to begin a new leadership program with a new group of people is to have them share their proudest accomplishment with each other. And I asked them this exact same question during the interview process, but I realized that I don't want to be the only person who gets to see people light up when they're sharing about overcoming something that was difficult or they're sharing an accomplishment that they're really proud of. Being vulnerable isn't something to be ashamed of. It takes so much strength and bravery to share your story, especially when you're trying to get to know a new group of people. Leadership myth number 9 is good leaders have a confrontational, tell it like it is leadership style. As I mentioned earlier, self-awareness is key. And during my time as a Leadership Now participant, I learned about conflict resolution. And I learned that I'm the type of person who avoids conflict. And that makes sense to me because all of my immediate family members are the same way. So growing up, sometimes things could become passive aggressive in the house because one person's mad about something and they expect the other person to know what they're mad about, but they won't tell them exactly what they're mad about. So obviously that is not a helpful solution. But at the same time, you don't have to necessarily go to a confrontational or a brutally honest kind of stance either. For me, I'm a very sensitive person, and while I do appreciate when people are brutally honest with me, I genuinely appreciate the feedback and the opportunity to learn and be better. But I will admit, I can easily go into like this spiral of over analyzing something I did or said. And I, knowing that about myself and not wanting to make anybody else feel that way, because not only do we all deserve to show each other grace, but we deserve to show ourselves grace also. So I think it's more beneficial to reframe the idea of confrontation and switch it to conversation. Because when people are hurt, that's when they start to put up walls and get defensive. And that's when they start listening to respond instead of listening to understand. So the idea of confronting somebody, that's active and there is somebody on the receiving end of that confrontation. So switching it to thinking about having a conversation then makes it a two-way street where understanding can then be the outcome. As I'm wrapping up, I do want to mention that Leadership Pikes Peak has 3 leadership programs this summer. Our first program is Leading Edge, that's for juniors and seniors in high school. Programming will begin in June, and there is no application fee. So if you happen to know any teens who would be interested in learning more about their city and their community and themselves, definitely encourage them to apply. We are also having our signature program in Leadership Now program for young professionals begin in August, as if you haven't heard me talk about it enough today. But we are offering an early bird application fee through April. Please check out our website and do not hesitate to reach out to myself, Keith Wilshaw, who manages the signature program, and Dr. Hillary Reed, who manages the Leading Edge program. We are more than happy to provide any information and answer any questions. And I just want to take this opportunity and use this platform to say one more thing before I wrap up. My mom has been fighting a rare epithelioid sarcoma for the last 6 years, and she was hospitalized last week due to COVID. She's out of the hospital now and she's on the mend, which my family is so grateful for. But I just want to take this opportunity to let all of the people on the call now and people who watch this video later, please continue to take COVID seriously and please do your part as a member in this community to protect your fellow community members, because it's a really scary feeling not knowing if you'll be able to see your loved one again. And we're seeing the light at the end of this tunnel, but it's still really important to do our part as community members and to protect each other, because really nobody else should suffer from COVID-19. Thank you so much to UCCS and the Chamber for inviting me to speak, and thank you to all of you for listening.
Thank you, Keeley. I just let Don unmute himself, so hopefully he will, and hopefully he'll be sharing with us now his presentation.
Are we ready?
Yes. Are you ready, Don?
I am ready.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for joining us. And thank you, Keeley, for your presentation. I know we've done this backwards today, but now that we have your amazing stories, now Don can explain to us the theory behind them. So thank you, Don. Go ahead.
Yeah. And by the way, Keeley, our hearts and prayers are with your mother. And thank you for your presentation, and all that have joined us today. Thank you for being here. I love talking about leadership. When leaders lead, great things are possible. And when you research best run organizations and what makes them great, it always gets back to leadership, especially at the top, but literally throughout the organization. When you train and develop good leaders who know how to lead, and you have them throughout the organization, you are going to perform far better than most. In fact, the research on leadership indicates that where you have an organization that has well-trained, excellent leaders, over a 10-year period, the organization will perform at about 7 times the industry average. That's pretty amazing. Now, leadership, however, can be very complicated. It's probably the most written about subject in all of business, and yet the least understood. So here's what I'm going to do right off at the bat. I'm going to tell you the keys to good leadership, and then I'll go into the details. So here's what you need to do. First of all, you have to have a very clear definition of leadership that you can understand and practice. And we're going to go into detail about this, but I'll just tell you what it is right up front. Leadership is the process of providing vision, direction, and inspiration, and bringing out the best in people, teams, and organizations. So we've got vision. Leaders make clear where we're going. Direction is how you get there. Inspiration is inspiring and encouraging people. And then the second part of that is to have as your mindset and your practice every day as a leader, bringing out the best in people, teams, and organizations. We act the way we think. So if you understand that, that will become part of you, the way you think, the way you see things, the way you act, and your leadership skills will tend to make an incredible difference. The second thing, by the way, is to develop a clear leadership philosophy. I have all of my students on one page write down what the best leaders should do. And of course, I give them lots of samples so they don't have to start from scratch. But it really is pretty commonsensical. When people tell me what I'm an expert in or what I do, I tell them I'm a specialist in state-of-the-art common sense. So what you will hear today, and probably what you heard from Keeley, is really state-of-the-art common sense. It's common sense, but it does have to apply to a very changing environment. But if you can put on one page the 10 or so things that the best leaders do, then you can purposefully practice being a better and better leader. And what changes behavior, by the way, that'd be a whole nother subject, is practicing new behaviors. It's not so much how you got the way you are, why you do what you do, whose fault it is, how justified you are in doing what you're doing, but it's in practicing new behaviors till they become normal. So if you have a clear definition and a philosophy that you practice, you can become a highly skilled leader. Now, I'll go back very quickly to these myths that Keeley was talking about and just clear some things up about leadership. The first one, of course, leaders are born and not made. And by the way, in a literal sense, all leaders are born. Would you agree? I learned that from Warren Bennis, by the way, who's probably the foremost expert in the world on leadership. And he said, fact is, all leaders are born. And then he goes on to say, but you can learn to be a good leader. Some people are gifted as leaders. Some of you who are listening probably have always been a pretty good leader, even when you were in grade school. You just sort of shined as a leader. But even people who are gifted as leaders have to develop and practice those skills to get better. You could be a gifted violinist or pole vaulter, but if you never practice, you're not going to really realize your capabilities. So even if leadership is your gift, you have to learn, grow, and keep practicing. But most people can learn the fundamentals of leadership. And in fact, when I work with organizations, if I can get them simply to understand that definition and create a philosophy that they practice, they literally become a different leader. Secondly, and by the way, of course, it's not just for people in formal positions. You can lead whether you're in a formal position or just influencing people. The primary job is to get results. By the way, that's critical. But we forget that the best leaders actually practice two things, not one: getting results and building organizations where people can flourish. When I use the word organization, you may not be at the top. You may be leading a team, a group of some sort, a family, or whatever. So you need to realize that your job is twofold: to get great results and build a great place to be. Third, skilled leaders are able to change their leadership style with different situations and different people. And I know Keeley was just talking about this, and I would like to simplify that. Most of the researchers on leadership concluded that we need situational leaders because different situations are different, and that they change their style with different situations. In reality, what you need is a consistent style. It's your skills that you change with different situations. I hope you're following the difference. That really simplifies leadership. So you don't have to become a different person with different people or different situations. You can be you at your best. And what you're doing is sizing up situations to change your skills. So Keeley used the example of different people and so on. And yes, you can adjust the skills. Some people just need to be told what to do. You let them fly. It requires very little attention. Other people need a lot of attention, coaching, and so on. Those are skills. But you as a person can be the same, whether you're working with people at the top, the bottom, or wherever. To lead, you need to be in a position of formal leadership position. And I mentioned that actually a lot of the most influential leaders are not in formal positions, but they are influential because they understand leadership. The best leaders are charismatic and commanding. The early research on leadership suggested that you have to be this kind of bigger than life, rock star, charismatic kind of person to be a good leader. Research actually turns out quite the opposite. Most good leaders are not charismatic. By the way, it's not a bad thing if you are, but charisma is not going to replace results and taking care of your people. So the best leaders actually are just normal, genuine people that you can trust and relate to. Whether they're charismatic or not isn't really necessary. Commanding, we've moved away from the autocratic style where you have to be in charge, and when you bark, people run. That's not what good leadership is about. It's about relationships and about understanding your people and how to get the best out of them and so on. Good, and I heard Keeley talk about this, they keep a psychological distance between themselves and those they lead. Sure, you need some good common sense where you're not playing favorites. That isn't going to go over, but you need to know your people, care about them. And by the way, like Keeley said, there are risks involved in doing that. Leadership isn't a formula. There's a lot of judgment involved, but you need to be close to your people, but also able to make objective decisions. The fundamentals of leadership have changed over the years. You know what's really interesting about that? And I got this again from Warren Bennis, the foremost expert in the world on leadership. And he said the fundamentals have always been the same through time. Back in biblical times when we studied a lot about leaders, and up to today where we study about leaders, those fundamental common sense principles have remained the same. It's the environment in which we apply them that has changed dramatically. This high-tech kind of environment we're in, faced with things like pandemics, that's changed the environment considerably. But the fundamentals of working with people remotely or face-to-face are pretty much the same. And this idea that leaders need to be in your face, kind of confrontational, I talk a lot with my students about this because we're in a culture that really values people telling it like it is. You're candid, you're straightforward, and you pat yourself on the back. I'm just a tell it like it is person. There's no virtue or self-control involved in that at all. Do you realize that? It doesn't take any good sense, wisdom, or self-control to just blurt out, what you think and feel. So good leaders are straightforward, they're honest, they're transparent, they're candid, but they do it in helpful ways, not harmful ways. In other words, if you were to confront somebody about something, you can do it in a kind and caring way, or you can do it in an in-your-face kind of way. And when you do it in a kind and caring way, it breaks down all kinds of resistance. When you do it in a confrontational way, you start with two problems. You've now got whatever the issue is, and you've got your style of dealing with it. By the way, Anna and I talk about this all the time in our marriage. When we have an issue, we can either talk about it in a kind and caring way, or we can be confrontational in your face. Then we've got two problems. Not only the issue, but now we've escalated it with our style. So those would clear up the myths. Now, if you go to the next slide, I'll go through this very briefly, and I assume that you can get these slides so you can go back and review them. But it talks about potential payoffs of developing skilled leaders. And here's the message. You can go through the list, but the idea is that you need to be a champion in your organization for the development of leaders, not just ones at the top, but all through the organization. When I work with organizations, if I can even get the attention of the top leader, it makes a difference in the whole organization. But the ideal then would be not only top leader, but all of his or her direct reports. And then beyond that, why not go through the whole organization and make leadership development a clear cultural value of that organization? So it's about leadership development. And there's plenty of research to indicate that when you develop leaders, there's a high payoff. Productivity increases, motivation, morale, the culture really makes it possible for people to flourish, teamwork improves, and so on. Okay, next slide. Potential cost. Usually when I do classes or workshops, we love to talk about the payoffs of leadership. What you also need to consider is the cost of not developing leaders. Just assuming whoever you put into a place is going to be a good leader. But how do we actually put people in leadership roles? And by the way, sometimes we call them supervisors, managers. It's all the same. They're basically leaders and managers. Both skills are critical, but I'll just call it leadership. But the way you get into those positions usually is you're really good at something. And so now we say, well, now we'll put you in charge of a bunch of other people. And a lot of times we lose a good technician and gain a poor leader. It's kind of a lose-lose deal. So you need to realize it pays to develop leaders, but it costs if you're not going to do it. And think how many of your organizations, when people get put into a management, supervisory, leadership position, whatever you want to call it, do they usually get any training, any development? When getting into a supervisory management or leadership position is one of the few positions you can get overnight with no training, no certification. You just have to be good at something. So we need to make it known. It pays to develop them, especially before they move into a leadership role. It costs when you don't. Next slide. Let's see. Is the next one coming up there? Oh yeah, principles of being a skilled leader at any level. Now, keep in mind, I've already told you what the definition is up there. So that's the key to the whole thing. Understand that definition. Leadership is the process of providing vision, direction, and inspiration, and bringing out the best in people, teams, and organizations. So vision is not just having a vision statement that inspires people, like NASA had, we're going to put a person on the moon and bring them back by the end of the decade. That's a wonderful vision. But vision means really, even when you just give people assignments, taking the time to say, okay, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's why it's so important. Here's what it would look like if you did a really good job. So vision really creates a picture of where we're going that's clear to people. Direction is how you get there. Typically, that includes like goals. Those are the specifics. Values, that's how we go about doing things. And priorities, goals, values, and priorities. What's really important? The most fun part of leadership is really inspiration, is encouraging and inspiring people. But you know what? That's easier said than done. If you're going to be inspire your people, you've got to be an example worthy of following. You've got to actually care about people because it takes time to inspire people, encourage them, coach them, motivate them, and so on. One of my executive MBA students came up to me and said, I'm part of a new company. We're growing really fast. I've been put in charge of the people part of the organization. So the problem is I don't really like people. Well, that is kind of a problem. And so I said, well, you better learn to like people. So how do you learn new behaviors? First, you have to commit to a new behavior, and then you have to practice it till it becomes normal. So I told him, whether you feel like you like people or not, you need to commit that you're going to start becoming a people person. And that means you're going to start talking to people, caring about them, learning about them. And then you figure out how to bring out the best in them. So inspiration is really the fun part of leadership. This idea of bringing out the best in people, teams, and organizations is not a bunch of techniques. It's really an attitude. Now, think about this. Let's just say you took the first one, and for one day even in your life, you are going to make your number one priority bringing out the best in people. From start to finish, by the way, from the time you get up till the time you turn in. Would that make any difference in your day? Considerable difference. If you have people at home, for example, rather than you just race to get ready, run off and hardly say anything to anybody, now you actually pay attention to people. You say good morning to people, wish them a good day. It would change even the way you treated family members. Probably even change the way you drive to work, where you get angry because people go too fast, too slow, or whatever. What if you're going to bring out the best in people? And so you let somebody move in front of you. And throughout the day, you're looking for opportunities to listen to people, encourage people, and do something that would really bring out the best in them. Same with teams and the whole organization. You don't always get opportunities to do that, but if you're thinking that way, you find opportunities. The The best leaders have a passion for excellence and are humble. I love this one. This came actually from Jim Collins, and he wrote a series of books, started with Built to Last, then Good to Great, Great by Choice, and a number of other ones. And one of the things that they discovered in the Good to Great book is when they identified these a number of companies to study to see what percent actually went from good to great. And by the way, this might be an interesting question for you. They studied 1,135 companies. How many do you think made the cut of going from good to great? Yeah, take a guess at that. The answer is 11. 11 out of 1,135 companies. That will give you some idea of how few companies actually do have good leaders and are built to bring out the best in people, teams, and organizations. There aren't many out there, but they reap great benefits when they do. Anyway, he studied these 11 companies, and particularly the leaders of those 11 companies. And the leaders were vastly different in style, person. A few were charismatic, most were not. But he found out two things that separated the best leaders from the rest. And you may want to ask this about yourself. They had a strong professional will, which translates to a passion for excellence. In other words, they had a passion for excellence that was contagious. It really affected people, even though a lot of them were kind of low-key, very, low-key kind of people. That passion for excellence was there. We're not going to settle for mediocrity, just being good. We want to be really good at what we do. Secondly, and this fascinates me, this was a breakthrough insight that the best leaders are actually humble. They're not bigger than life rock stars, super self-confident and all that sort of thing. In fact, they're actually quite humble. And now, all of a sudden, humility has become a major focus of leadership studies and research. Because guess what? We're finding out, and by the way, it's always been true. All the best leaders I've worked with, and I've worked with hundreds of them in organizations, the best ones were always had a passion for excellence, and they were always humble. Again, you can go back to biblical times, and what does it say about the best leaders? They were very humble. So this is not new, but it just got discovered in research and just caught on like wildfire, because humility makes great sense. When a leader is humble, they're more approachable. You can be more open with them, more candid with them. They create a safe environment for discussing issues, challenging things, providing feedback. And so humility actually is really good common sense. Humility doesn't mean that you can't be really good at what you do. The best athletes are really good at what they do, but the best ones are humble, and we don't see that much anymore. Most of them beat their chest and tell you how wonderful and great they are, but the best actually are quite humble. Those athletes are approachable. They're in a position to influence and coach others because it's not just all about them. And so the keys are a passion for excellence and humility. Now, I'll tell you what the problem with this is. How do you teach somebody to be humble? I mean, I wish I could offer a course on the 5 steps to looking humble, but it's kind of hard to do. I mean, this is an issue of the heart. And so if you can't reach the heart of leaders, you're going to waste your time in talking about humility, just not normal or natural to them. And think about our culture today. Does it teach humility? Quite the opposite. Look out for number one, do your own thing, me first, myself second. If anything's left over, I'll take it. It's kind of this whole self-consumed sort of society. So we've got an issue of the heart there. Lead by example with an example worthy of following in respect for others, attitude, performance, behavior, serving others, One of the most popular leadership concepts today is servant leadership. That's always been true, but now we have a lot of research to indicate that it actually makes sense. But if you're not an example worthy of following, people aren't going to respect you. They're not going to follow you. And what's interesting about this, if we could teach this to leaders, where they genuinely respected people, and I say people, I mean, people come in all types, sizes, genders, and so on. But if they just really cared about people and treated them all with respect, we wouldn't need all these government regulations that are paralyzing organizations today. They're not going to work anyway. They're just going to make getting things done more complicated. But if we taught people to respect others, when I teach people skills, I tell them that if you can understand respect and what it not only means to respect people, but what you do that disrespects people, that'll pretty well take care of all the people skills. The next one is commit to purposefully building a healthy, high performance organization with a positive, solutions focused culture that brings out the best in people and so on. So here's the key. Leaders need to see their job as building healthy organizations where people can flourish, teams, any group of people. So when I say organization, I'm really talking about any size, families, sports teams, symphonies, whatever you do. Leaders need to realize, again, it's not just getting results, but it's also building these organizations, and especially ones that have this kind of positive culture where we can be open, we can be candid, we work as a team, we look out for one another. Culture is turning out to be the real key skill that some researchers think is the most important skills leaders should have. If they can build a culture of openness, candidness, teamwork, where we really care about each other and we help each other do well, that may be, in some minds, the most important skill a leader could have. Most of my writings, by the way, for the last few years have been about culture and how to build it. Create and make clear a compelling vision that gives people a cause for doing what they do. Develop a meaningful mission. Provide clear direction on what it will take to be successful and inspire people to be their best. That's a lot of stuff, but it's just saying that leaders really need to take the time, whether it's running a whole organization or a team, to clarify and communicate to everybody again and again, what's our vision? What's our mission? What are our core values? What do people have to do to succeed? And when you have that kind of clarity, you don't have to do a lot of micromanaging of people. They can now manage themselves because they know where we're going. They know what they have to do. They know what they have to do to be successful. So it's very important that you take the time to do some of these just simple sort of things that a lot of leaders never do. By the way, probably Keeley could validate this as well. But if you are in a service-oriented organization, and this is particularly true, by the way, of religious organizations, they can attract and retain top-level people, even though they don't pay that well. And they don't always have the best facilities and buildings and technology, primarily because they have a mission that is meaningful to people and they care about. So leaders, even if you're leading a team, work really hard at making work meaningful. This is the mission of our team. This is the mission of our department. This is the mission of our organization. This is why it's so important. And what we found from research is that when people have a sense of mission and purpose, productivity goes way up, loyalty goes up, retention goes up, and we're able to attract and retain the best. So, next slide.
Hey, actually, Don, we're at time here, and we had
Okay.
one question in the chat. So I wanted to have you and Keeley both address the question before we sign off.
Okay, so I will wrap it by saying commit to bring out the best in people, teams, and organizations, and you'll flourish in your life and your career. Now we're ready for questions.
Awesome, thank you, Don. Okay, here's the question from Ernest. In the absence of developing or assigning a leader, a de facto leader will always emerge and they will not always be the best person for the role. Please discuss the potential harm this may create for an organization. Would you start by answering that, Don?
I didn't really understand the question. I think it's, go ahead.
Yeah, the question is mostly, sometimes there's a person that is an obvious leader for a new role, but they're not always the best person. So what's the harm that this could create for an organization if they don't do their due diligence in looking for the best possible leader, not just the de facto leader?
Well, I mean, you're always best to have the right people in the right places doing the right things. And so that takes a lot of understanding of the role that you're trying to put a leader in, of evaluating the skills of people available, and then getting the best person in there. But when it doesn't turn out to be the best person, to give them the development coaching that you can to help them be the best person. And if none of that works out, to have the good sense to maybe put them in a position where they can flourish and get somebody else in there. You know, the problem is that we make bad decisions and we just continue in them and live with them. That's where the costs come.
Thank you, Don. Keeley, do you have anything to add?
I mean, the potential harm for that can go in a bunch of different ways. Somebody who's just eager to say yes definitely might not be the right person. They might not have the right experience or background or knowledge, as opposed to somebody who might not always be that yes person, especially without like the time to kind of think it over and think about the responsibilities and the roles and the expectations that are required for that position. So yeah, the potential harm for that can come out in a multitude of different ways. But yeah, that is something that would need to be addressed, and the right people, like Don said, the right people have to be in the right positions to achieve the right goals.
Well, thank you both for your time today and speaking to this group, and we appreciate it very much and your leadership skills. If possible, may I share your email addresses with the attendees? Okay, perfect. Don, is that okay with you? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today during this business briefing, and I will be sending out the recording of this event here in the next couple of days. So share it with folks that you think might benefit. Thanks everyone, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.